Hello folks, Darrel Smith from South Dakota. So it could be DS from SD with a story, and I'll call it Top. His name was George, but they called him Top possibly because of his head of bright red hair. We had been flying together for well over a year in North Carolina in our training, hopefully to become combat ready A4 pilots, attack pilots, and we were nearing that goal. In fact, George, or Top, was scheduled to leave just in a few days, and this was one of his last flights with the squadron. We were all lieutenants, and we were all had learned probably the same amount about flying, but they alternated leads so that we would all get a chance to fly wing and also fly lead when we arrived in Vietnam. Well, it was a cold front. The weather had passed through. Normally the weather in North Carolina was pretty mild, but on this occasion a cold front had come through, and it had been wind, heavy rains, and the temperature had dropped to just slightly below freezing. Top and I were scheduled to fly a two-plane flight the next morning. The day dawned clear and cold. He was assigned to be the leader. Well, we did the normal procedure. We met in the briefing room. He did his briefing, and we signed for and proceeded over the ramp to our aircraft. It was nippy cold that day, and we felt the chill on our cheeks. But we climbed into our jets, and we got started, and everything was going absolutely normal, and we lined up on the runway. When approved by the tower, we started our takeoff roll. I did my best to stay in the takeoff position, right on like a formation. We were taking off together. And I was doing my best, and I just saw his nose wheel start to leave the runway, and I tried to match that. We both became momentarily airborne. Suddenly, Top shouted or broadcast on the radio, aborting, and put his aircraft back onto the runway. I took a slight turn to the right and continued to climb, and then turned back over his line of travel, and to see what was going on. And the sight I saw was shocking, and I won't remember it. I mean, I will remember it for the rest of my life. There was a brand new airplane upside down with its wheels sticking straight up in the air, a tailpipe smoking white smoke, and the cockpit was pressed into the ground. I shouted on the radio, there's an aircraft upside down off the end of the runway. Pilot needs help right now. Get out here and get him some help. So I went ahead and pulled up my gear and with flaps, and I flew around by myself, just killing time for maybe 30 minutes or so before I returned to the base. Now, the big problem on that takeoff was that George, in order to give me plenty of room on the runway, had lined up slightly left of the center line. All Navy and Marine Corps bases have a resting gear installed on their runways, because most aircraft that we flew had tail hooks. And those arresting gear would be part of the aborting procedure. This particular resting gear was the very basic kind. There was huge chains laid out along the side of each of the runway, on each side of the runway, and they were not just casual chains. These were big chains with links that were heavy. It'd be hard to pick up each one of them. So as you engage the arresting cable stretched across the runway, these links of chain would be pulled out in ever resistant, increasing resistance, and bring the aircraft hopefully to a stop and maybe save the pilot and the aircraft. Well, the problem with for this particular day was he was off center. He had lined up, left the center line, so he was pulling more lengths of chain from one side than he was the other, and the aircraft swerved as it went off the end of the runway. Because of the heavy rain before, the wheels dug into the mud, and it flipped onto its back. George, of course, the emergency crew came on their way, but the canopy had been broken, and he was trying to get out of the canopy, but it was tight. He was stuck there. And when the rescue team arrived, a young Marine picked up the refueling probe that had been broken off and attempted to break the canopy to get George out. But the refueling probe happened to be still full of fuel, and that was dumped onto top. So he was now trapped in an airplane that was upside down and soaked in jet fuel. I think I remember him saying that he said some quite colorful language to the young man that put the jet fuel on him. Well, everything worked out okay. George got out and he made it back to the squadron. He was supposed to leave in a day or two, but they kept him around for 2 or 3 days, and he flew several more flights just to make sure he was mentally ready. Well, I started writing this, and my daughter Kelly is helping me to organize it into a book. Well, she made the effort and actually got in contact with George, and we communicated and compared our remembered how we remembered this particular flight. He didn't remember that it was I. He didn't remember who the other pilot was. Our versions of the story are very much the same. So George left the squadron in a few days, went on to Vietnam, and while he was there, he flew combat missions, but he also worked in the field with the Marines and spent 20 years and retired from the Marines. He now lives in the panhandle of Florida. He and his wife on a small farm or farmette, and with their pets. It's a very peaceful life. It's said that I learned that he had a very similar situation later on, but he continued and got airborne and brought the aircraft around and landed. I think it's interesting that that particular training squadron, the first squadron we were in, there were about 30, I think, pilots, and I've discovered over the years that 3 of us have written books about our experience in life. I think that's very unusual. 10% of the population that had written books is well above normal. So that's the story of Top. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.